Thanks for checking out this movie review video. So this is for the 1975 release, the Rocky Horror Picture Show. Now, this is a film that I've gotten some guff for not having watched on here because I've admitted to it on a few videos that I've done, and people have kind of hit me in the comments and been like, "Oh my gosh, I cannot believe you've never seen Rocky Horror Picture Show." So I figured sometime soon I would need to take care of it, and I just took care of it. I watched it for the first time. Now, this is actually a film I've been aware of for at least 20 years now, because when I was in high school, I was in the drama company for the high school I was in, and drama nerds love Rocky Horror Picture Show. So I was very much aware of a lot of the music from the film because, we would have plenty of downtime and people would just play music from musicals, so I heard a lot of it and people talking about it and everything. So it's been a film that's been on my list to see for quite some time. I just never got around to it, and now I finally did, so rejoice. Let's all celebrate. I will say off the bat, I enjoyed it. This will be a spoiler review since it is an old film, and yeah, I had fun. I think it's a fun film. It's definitely a not to be taken seriously, obviously, because of what it is. There's a lot of humor intended in it. There's a lot of parody to it as well, and it's a musical. Like it's kind of supposed to be fun because that's the nature of the music. So if you're going into it being like, "Oh, I really want to watch like a serious good movie," it's not for you. So anyway, let's get into this. It was directed by a Jim Sharman, who did the films Summer of Secrets, The Night the Prowler, and Shock Treatment. Of those, I've only heard of Shock Treatment. I have not seen it, but I think it might actually be in my DVD queue through Netflix. I think. I'm not sure. This one was written by Richard O'Brien, who he wrote the screenplay, he composed the music, he did the lyrics, he actually did the stage performance, worked that whole thing up, I think in like 1973. Yeah, 1973. So the film was then based off his stage performance he put together in 73. So then the film came 2 years later, and they did make changes to the film that weren't in the stage performance. They added some scenes, apparently. I don't know specifically what scenes, but they added some scenes. So Richard O'Brien also plays Riff Raff in the film, who is actually one of my favorite characters. I think his acting, how he portrayed that character, was one of my favorite things because he also really got into kind of the posture of the character. So it wasn't just like dialogue, delivering the lines awesome, but his physical acting of the character I thought was really cool. Plus, it was one of the more interesting characters. There are a lot of interesting characters, but one of the most interesting, I would say, other than, Tim Curry's Dr. Frankenfurter, obviously, who in this review, just to shorten it, I'm just going to go with Frank from now on, because that's said in the film anyway. So, yeah, so big props to Richard O'Brien for putting this together. It's a very creative project. It's a very, very creative thing that he put together, and the music is really good. So the fact that he composed that and put the lyrics to it, very awesome. So Richard O'Brien actually is mainly known as an actor, at least through his IMDb credits. He was in Flash Gordon, he was in Shock Treatment, and the best of them all, he was in Dark City, which Dark City is a awesome kind of appreciated gem in my opinion. Maybe I think I should do a review on that at some point, but we'll see when I get to that. So obviously Tim Curry's in this. Big deal. He kind of steals the show as Dr. Frankenfurter. He's awesome. He plays that character amazingly. It looks like he had an unbelievable time playing that character. He just oozes everything that Frankenfurter's supposed to be, and love it. So it had Susan Sarandon before she was really a big name. It has Barry Bostwick before he was, I don't want to say a big name, because Barry Bostwick's not like a big name. Like, a lot of people know him, but a lot of people don't know his name. But if they saw his face, it'd be like, oh yeah, that guy. Because he's done like a lot of TV stuff, especially in his later years. So, and then Meatloaf, before Meatloaf was really anything, because his first album, Bat Out of Hell, came out in 1977, 2 years after the Rocky Horror Picture Show. But you can see his singing chops and his ability in the film, obviously. I actually I've met Meatloaf before, and yes, he does introduce himself as Meat. So he goes by his first name as Meat and his last name by Loaf. So just letting people know that. And he actually signs Yeah, meat and loaf are two separate words. I'm actually looking at what he signed for me. It was him as Bob from Fight Club, which, by the way, I'm going to dish a little info on it. He said that on the set that he was one of the more professional actors as far as showing up, doing their job, and not causing problems. And he was like, because some people who you would think would be very professional on the set are not, and they're more problems. And I was like, okay. And then he's like, it wasn't like Brad Pitt or anyone. So I was thinking, and I'm thinking it's either Edward Norton or Helena Bonham Carter, potentially Jared Leto too. I don't know, but maybe Edward Norton, because he specifically wanted to call out Brad Pitt, but Edward Norton's kind of the other leading role, and he didn't say anything about Ed Norton, so I don't know. But anyway, just a little story. This film is actually categorized as a musical comedy horror. And I wrote down, how often is that done? I think it's a very unique combination of things. I think the only other one I can really think of off the top of my head, which is another one I haven't seen, and I know people are going to nail me for this in the comments, Little Shop of Horrors. That is on my list. Don't worry. It is also one I've been aware of for quite some time, and I keep meaning to get to it. The thing for me is musicals are something I really have to be in the mood for. So, just saying. The budget on this is amazing. The budget on this film was $1.4 million, and in the box office, it made $140.2 million. That is a huge, amazing return, and I can pretty much guarantee that the studio that put this out had no clue that they were going to get that kind of return on this film. That's crazy. So the film was actually partially shot at Oakley Court in the UK, which was used for a bunch of Hammer films, the well-known horror Hammer films. Now, you can kind of see that when they go into the actual castle, and apparently they used a lot of the leftover set pieces and props that were used in Hammer films that just happen to still be there. So I feel like that's pretty cool. The audience participation with the film actually started just the next year in 1976 in New York. That's when it started getting its big cult following, when people would go to screenings of it and actually participate with it, like yell at the screen, get up and dance, participate, dress up, all that type of stuff. And the thing is, the film really lends itself to audience participation because of how much it feels like a party. It really just is made to have this party atmosphere, and I think a lot of that is driven by not only the music helps a lot, but the costuming as well, and just the overall, like, over the top of the film. And the fact that it is a comedy at heart really helps with that. It's just kind of like, go ahead, do what you want with it. It's meant to be fun. And, make fun of it. This is actually preserved in the National Film Registry by the Library of Congress, and that happened in 2005. So it's been in there for about 15 years now. That is excellent. So O'Brien himself, the guy who did it, was heavily influenced by glam rock when he was creating the show and the movie, and you obviously see that in the costuming. The working title for this was actually They Came from Denton High, which I'm glad they decided to go a different way with it, because I think the Rocky Horror Picture Show sounds a lot better, and also They Came from Denton High. I mean, like, there is a tie-in to Denton High in it, but the thing is, it doesn't work itself into the story enough, in my opinion. So the film added scenes not in the stage version. I already talked about that. The makeup for each character was designed by a Pierre LaRoche, who was the makeup artist for Mick Jagger and David Bowie. So if you keep that in mind and you watch the film, you really can see it. There are some, like, stylistic similarities there if you think to Mick Jagger and David Bowie. O'Brien was apparently has attempted 3 separate times to put together a sequel to Rocky Horror Picture Show. So he's written 3 separate scripts that were meant to be sequels to it, and each time it's just kind of fallen through for different reasons. The first one he tried to do, which was not that long after the original film, the reason that fell apart is because he wanted all the same characters, and Tim Curry said he would not return to that character. So that was kind of a big no-go, because obviously Tim Curry, I don't want to say Tim Curry is the film, but he's a huge part of the film, obviously. Okay, so let's get into the actual, like, some of the events of the film. The lip singing in the beginning, I actually think is kind of a dumb choice. And I know when I say that, there will be some people out there that just have such a love for this film that they'll kind of be like, oh my gosh, are you kidding me? But hear me out on this. As someone who just saw it, understand my perspective. I just saw it. Now, I understand that if this is something that people have seen a long time ago in their youth, like, you view it differently, and you just kind of, like, start to form this affinity for it, so you just love it for all its quirks and everything. I'm looking at it from, like, a stepping outside, looking at it from a film perspective. I think the lips thing is a little dumb for an introduction. It's weird, and I just don't think it works. I think it would have been more interesting if it was actually just, you know, an actual person like Frankenfurter actually singing and showing, like, his whole head. But, you know, that's just my own thing. So the song lyrics in the beginning actually refer to a bunch of science fiction movies that were done between the 1930s to the 1960s, which is basically a lot where a lot of the influence came from for O'Brien creating this. He was kind of raised on those old hokey science fiction films and wanted to put a lot of those references in it. You see it in the film, not initially, but mainly towards the end. Definitely towards the end, where everything's like, oh, these are aliens and they're gonna beam the castle back to their planet. So yeah, but it was just kind of meant to be like fun and be like an ode to those films, but also kind of make fun of them and mix in a little bit of horror stuff and obviously musical. So the monotone voices in the first song that keep saying Janet, I thought were really fun, and I feel like that type of thing is what helps encourage participation from the audience, because it seems like a more audience answer type portion of the song. The other thing I really liked about that initial song is the whole reference to the American Gothic painting, where it's, you know, the old farm woman and farm man. That was a real nice comedic moment. So I wrote down that one thing I definitely don't miss in film that was in this film that we've kind of grown out of, and I'm so glad, is screen wipes. They didn't do a lot of it, but they did one early on, and that just, like, wipe where it goes to the next. They look so bad, and I know it used to be a thing. It was just a thing of the time. I'm not saying it's a problem with this film. I'm just saying that reminded me, oh, I'm so glad we moved away from this in film in general. The narration in this, I actually think, is a bad choice. I think it's very distracting. The one that's done by Charles Gray, who I believe is the guy who plays Blofeld in the James Bond films, which he does. I mean, he's a good actor. He does a good job. It's just, I just don't think it's needed. I feel like it's a distraction when those narration parts come in, and it kind of like breaks up the flow of the film and the musical. And I also feel like it doesn't add much. Like, everything that's done in those portions, I feel like just doesn't add anything. So it kind of makes me wonder if that was something that was added for the film that wasn't in the stage portion of it. I don't know, but I just didn't like it. Wasn't my thing. So this consistently pokes fun at societal norms, which is something I really like about this, and I think something that really appeals to people who are really into the film. Like Brad being the perfect male specimen because he was so forceful in the beginning. That's like an early quote from Frankenfurter when he kind of steps in and he's like trying to defend his wife, and he's like, "Oh, you're such a perfect male specimen." That's the start of these references to these societal norms and what you're supposed to be like as a woman, what you're supposed to be like as a man. It's also very clearly seen in the beginning with the wedding and how it's written on the side of the car that basically, I think it was like, she got hers, now he'll get his. The reference to, you have to wait for sex until you're married. And obviously Janet and Brad are doing that until they get to the castle, and then they're obviously involved, not even with sex with each other. Actually, they never even get it on with each other, I don't think, in the whole film, but just other people. So that's obviously just shattering these societal norms that they were obviously sticking to in the very beginning of the film. And that's just kind of like an ongoing theme. The use of colors in this film are awesome. I love the use of all these awesome colors. The reds, the blues, the pinks, just amazing. And that paired with the costuming is just so interesting and over the top and eye-catching. And between those two things, the colors and the costuming, it's very awesome. It has a really nice aesthetic. It just looks great. Plus the directing is pretty well done in this film as well. The lighting changes too, especially early on in the film, are really nice, and the strobing that they used looks really good. Keeps you engaged in it. Once you see the creation of Rocky, you see the clear tie-in between Frankenfurter and Frankenstein, Dr. Frankenstein. I mean, obviously it's right there in front of your face with the name of Frankenfurter, but in the story, you finally see it when he's, bringing Rocky to life. It's like, okay, there it is. It's very, very clear now. You truly... Oh, sorry. I messed up my notes. You truly never know what's going to happen next, which is where a lot of the fun comes from with this film. And I wrote down once again, like I said in the beginning, it just feels like a party. Like almost the whole film, except when it gets a little more serious, feels like a party. And once again, I feel like that's what has encouraged people to participate in the film. The use of silhouettes during the Frank and Janet and the Brad and Frank bedroom scenes, I think, are really cool. Once again, that's also cool use of colors where, Janet's bed is all covered in like red, and then Brad's is all covered in blue, showing like the clear female aspect and the clear male aspect, and how Frank goes in and is just like, I'm going to get it on with her. I'm going to get it on with him. And they both like it. They're having their societal norms just shattered. Their minds are blown because they're like, we're not supposed to do this, but guess what? We really like it. We should really just let ourselves go. And he's just that kind of, he's the portion of their brain that says do it, that just pushes them to just say, you know what? Forget the societal norms. It's fine to just give in to your sexuality every now and then. However it plays out. The body in the dinner table reveal, in like the makeshift casket, was a really cool reveal that I didn't see coming. That was a really nice horror moment to the film. Because a lot of it, like there's horror, it's like horror-ish with a lot of stuff. And obviously there's a lot of sci-fi injected into it intentionally. But I feel like that body reveal was probably the most horror-related thing in it. Well, there are a lot of horror things, I guess, but I feel like that was the most genuinely kind of shocking horror moment, in my opinion, and I appreciated it. So the machine that sticks them to the floor and then eventually turns them into statues, I think is the first very clear sci-fi thing that shows up in this film. Obviously, it gets way more serious when you find out, Magenta and Riff Raff are actually aliens and they're taking the castle back to their planet. But that's the first, like, clear sci-fi moment, I think. The smoke clearing towards the end, when the smoke clears and it reveals the pool that Frank falls into, I thought that was an amazing shot that they pulled off. Really cool film sequence. Really, really loved that. That was definitely my favorite, visual portion of the film. It was so cool. That whole pool scene in general is really well pulled off. Then I said, sci-fi really shows up at the end, like really shows up. And I really like the funny King Kong reference at the end where Rocky grabs Frankenfurter after he's been killed and is climbing the radio tower with him. And he even makes like some like grunting kind of guttural like ape noises to clearly be like, this is supposed to be King Kong. I thought that was pretty funny. All right, so that's all I have to say about the actual events of the film. Obviously, I had a good time. I enjoyed it. The music is obviously very well done and is fun, but it also properly reflects the mood of what's going on in the story, which is a very, very important thing. When you're doing a musical, you have to make sure that you're matching the story you're trying to tell. There are times I've seen musicals where they don't pull that off, and it really hinders the story, the film in general. Tim Curry's performance, obviously amazing. He's the perfect mix for this part of scary, mysterious, highly sexual, and stylish. And like I said before, it looks like he really enjoys himself with this film. He jumped in. He totally went all in on the character, and it really, really makes it work. So part of the appeal of this is the empowering party vibe for people who are unapologetically themselves. And for that reason, it plays as a very counterculture film. And I think that's one of the other things that's a big drive for people to love this film is if you know the people who are most into the film, every single person I've ever met are people who aren't your typical normal people, like normal people who operate by societal norms and are just happy to be like, oh, what's going on in the game today? Like, it might be a bad example, but you know what I'm talking about. These are people who are a little more free-thinking, a little more open, a little more fringe societally, and they kind of latch onto this because it is very much like a counterculture type film. And that's one of the things I like about it. I am that type of person as well. I'm very, not normal. I mean, I have a YouTube channel about movie reviews for horror. That is not normal. So, I just like that about it. So this ends up being the reverse of what usually happens, which is those on the fringes of society end up reintegrating into society and abiding by norms. So here you have the two straight-laced normies who end up becoming these misfits. They end up moving from the center of society all the way out to the periphery, and it's this kind of cool throw, the normal story on its head, which is fun. And then free sexual expression is an ongoing theme with the film, and is seen easily in the costuming itself. I think just like the music, the costuming, the actual acting of it, the content of the script and the lyrics of the songs, it's all about like listening to yourself, being sexual, allowing yourself. There's actually a quote by Frank at some point where he says something to the effect of, "It's not a crime to give into your sexuality," basically. That's not the exact quote, but it was something to that effect. That like it's not criminal to like be sexual, to like let yourself feel some sort of sexual, fulfillment. And that's one of the big driving things behind this film. And you see it easily. It's not like subtext, it is on the surface. And it makes sense for being a film that came out in the 70s, because it's very much about free love. Like, do what you want, experiment sexually, whatever. And it's not just about free love within the heteronormative way. It's, what are you into? Figure it out. Go with it. Indulge. And there you go. So that's kind of my review of the Rocky Horror Picture Show. Glad I finally watched it. I hope that satisfies people out there who have been like, what is wrong with you? So go ahead and put some comments down there and let me know about your experiences with the film. What are your thoughts? Like it, don't like it, things you see in it that I haven't seen in it. Go ahead and throw them all down there. But please help me out. Hit that subscribe button, and that keeps encouraging me to keep doing these videos, because I'm not getting paid or anything. But hit that subscribe. Literally takes you a second and is painless, but it can mean a lot to me and my channel, and I would appreciate that. You can do the likes, that's fine too, but the subscribe's the big thing. But thanks everyone for checking this out, and until next time, keep it brutal.